Hi, Dr. Eric Westman here, and it's my great pleasure to have Dr. Vera Tarman with me today. We're going to be talking about sugar addiction, food addiction. Is it real? What is it? What can you do about it? Hi, Vera. How are you doing?
Hi, Eric. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I need to just go over your bio in front of you. I know that's always a little bit nerve-wracking, but Dr. Tarman is the medical director of one of Canada's largest treatment centers for substance abuse. She's internationally renowned for her work on food addiction and sugar addiction, and author of the book, Food Junkies, Recovery from Food Addiction, as well as co-host of the popular podcast, Food Junkies. Dr. Tarman is highly respected in her field and has given talks at international meetings, but has also lived the food addiction life herself as a recovering food addict. I understand that you've lost and maintained over 100-pound weight loss. Is that right?
That's right.
That's fantastic. So the academic side, the real world living street credibility side, my pleasure to have you here. And I've learned so much from you over the last few years. I want to just thank you before we get into this, and because there was a niche or an element that I didn't quite understand as a keto doctor, a medical doctor, although my history in tobacco cessation kind of primed me for this, and you helped me kind of blend these two worlds that I thought were not together, but they really are for so many people. So thank you. And I suppose people are wondering, what is food addiction? How do you define it? Is it really a thing?
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to answer that question, but if I can, first of all, just thank you back to you, because I was really delighted when you were interested in the subject of food addiction, a few years ago when we initially had contact, because I discovered that the keto movement was using a food addiction friendly plan. And I was trying my best to get people to accept a food addiction plan with so much resistance. And then I just stumbled upon you and a community of people who are doing it happily. And it was like, what? How are you able to get people to do something that I could not do? And anyway, so it's a happy marriage as far as I'm concerned. So the definition of food addiction is actually even controversial within the community itself. We're struggling, should we call it sugar addiction? Because certainly sugar addiction is, almost everybody agrees, yes, sugar is addictive. I mean, the research there's more and more research showing that that's the case. It's kind of hard to argue that. I mean, yes, you'll find people who do to argue that, but there is more and more mounting research. But should we expand and just call it food addiction? Now it's a favorite. I'm going to define what these terms actually mean, but I just want to say, first of all, that we haven't landed on a term that we're happy with at this point. And probably the one that we're the most likely to settle on is processed food addiction, because I think most of us recognize that sugar addiction, yes, there is addiction to sugar. As I said, all the research that's mounting. But now there's more and more murmurings about processed food addiction. So it's not just sugar, it's also flour. It's basically processed foods, processed oils, it's processed foods, not just sugar. And it's not necessarily only the ingredient of sugar, but in the actual mechanics of food being processed, that something's happening there. So that will incorporate a larger umbrella. Personally, I still like the term food addiction because it makes for an even larger umbrella, which might include then foods that are not processed, like dairy, like nuts. I mean, dairy is somewhat processed, but it's not, in the same way as flour and cakes and candies and whatnot. Anyway, it opens up to the concept that there are trigger foods that can even be healthy, and also food behaviors like restricting or overeating, volume addiction. So it opens up the umbrella much larger, but likely we will settle on the concept of processed food addiction. So I had to say that because we're not even decided on what we should say, but let's, for the purposes of our talk today, use my definition, which is food addiction, because it opens up so many more possibilities.
So what would the practical reality of that definition be for someone watching? How do you know if you are a food addict?
Well, okay, so let me give the definition. One thing I want to say is that uh, before we get to how do you know, why is it that people don't even think about it? Why,
Okay.
is it even an entity? And it's it's not in the DSM-5. It's not in the clinical mindset of most physicians, especially obesity physicians, which you would think it would be, but it's not. It's not in the mindset of general practitioners, people who are dealing with even the eating disorder community. It's not in the mindset of that. And part of that is because it has not yet been acknowledged sort of on the clinical level. It's definitely been acknowledged in the popular internet lived experience. People are talking about it amongst themselves, but clinically it's not really being acknowledged. So we have to borrow, because we're calling it, you and I are using this word addiction, so we have to borrow from the addiction community and the addiction literature, because we can't use the food literature, we can't use the obesity literature. They're not talking this conversation. And so when I want to define what sugar or food or processed food addiction is, it's whatever that thing we're talking about is that we're addicted to. What are the behaviors? This is going to answer your question. This is a long answer to your question.
How do I know if I'm a food addict? Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So what are the behaviors that we expect? Now, this would be for any addiction, including cigarettes. You mentioned cigarettes, and that's probably why you and I are diving together on this topic, because I actually think food addiction is very similar to tobacco addiction, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But so we're looking for specific addictive behaviors. And let me give you the medical terminology, first of all, and then we'll look at the actual specifics of somebody listening going, well, is that me? So the medical large definition would be of addiction is just any neuropsychological, social, behavioral disorder that is characterized by compulsive, maladaptive behaviors, we'll talk about those in a minute, that a patient is unable to control or stop despite harmful consequences. So there's three elements to that. The compulsive, maladaptive behavior. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, but I'm gonna have to have you say it in different language.
Yes, I'm going to. So, but I just to boil that down: compulsive, maladaptive behavior, unable to stop despite negative consequences. So, what does compulsive maladaptive behavior mean? It means that you're behaving around food in a way that is compulsive and maladaptive. It's a problem. So, for example, do I eat more than I intend to? And these are the questions that I'm going to give you a bunch of questions now, and you can go on the internet and just type in what are the 20 questions for any addiction, including food addiction, and you'll find this. Do you eat more than you anticipate? I plan to eat only a little bit. I'm going to have just a couple of bars or chips, or I don't know what, but you end up eating the whole thing, and then somebody else's as well. Like it's far more than you meant to. Do you eat in a way that you don't want other people to know? Like, in other words, you'll eat privately or you'll lie. You'll say, you know what, I eat really well, but you don't tell people about what happens when you get home at night and you're alone.
Or late at night, in the middle of the night.
Exactly. And even to the point of when you're sleeping. So we got this concept of night eating. And when people are night eating, they're not eating, their celery sticks and their steak bits, bacon bits. No, they're eating stuff that, right. They see the wrappers on the floor. So even to themselves, they're not admitting it. So it might come to the point where they're lying about their eating. So maladaptive behaviors. So you're lying about it. You're eating foods that you don't want to be eating. You've been told by your doctor you're diabetic. You have to stop eating whatever refined food you're eating. And you may even realize, yes, I have a problem. Here are the this is the maladaptiveness, the negative consequences. But you can't stop. So often what happens is when people try to stop, it then becomes like this game of deprivation. I'm going to have this, now I'm going to stop. So anybody recognizes this behavior. You have a lot, then you decide I better stop, and then you find that you're eating more. And then you find that you're obsessing about it to the point where that's that is the mental landscape, is you're thinking about that food, or you're thinking about the consequences, the negative consequences. I'm going to gain weight. And that becomes the mental chatter in your mind all the time. So are you thinking about food all the time? Are you craving particular foods that you wish you didn't? Are you trying to stop? Are you lying about your food? Embarrassed about it, feel shame? These are all the behaviors that are associated with any addiction. Alcohol fits perfectly with this as well, but food does for sure. Usually you don't worry about it until you have negative consequences, because there's negative consequences. So those are the 20 questions. Or there's more. Do you, like I said, do you lie about it? Do you eat in secret? Do you eat foods that you threw away because you said, oh my God, I got to get rid of this, and then sneak up later and eat that food again? Are you willing to drive across the city to get that favorite treat that you want because the local store doesn't have it? Like, are you willing to go to the lengths that you would not do for a celery stick? Like, it's just behaviors that are out of the norm around food.
Well, and so one other issue that just really hits our hearts as practitioners trying to help people.
Yes.
Why do people blame themselves for
Yes.
this process? Because I joke in my clinic that I won't let you beat yourself up in here. I'm here to support you, and it's not your fault, and yet everyone comes in thinking it's their fault, even if it's cigarettes, even if it's Snickers bars or ice cream. Why? What part of addiction is it that in our brain that blame ourselves?
If I can make another analogy, this is like a person who has Tourette's. That Tourette's being this sort of person has twitches, or they bark, or they make funny sounds, or something like that. And if you say to them, hey, can you stop that because it's kind of noisy or it's bothersome, they could actually stop. They could stop. They could hold still and not twitch, but they can't stop the urge. There's a mental thing that's going on that is building and building and building. And then to the moment that you turn away, they're going to start twitching because they need to get it out of them. So people will say, I should just stop, Vera, stop this eating, behave myself. Well, yes, I can, because I can voluntarily pick this thing up and drink or eat and not, but I can't stop the desire. Once that's in my mind, it's triggering something in my brain, which is the whole concept of addiction. That's what we're talking about today. That thing is beyond my control. It's in a part of my brain, just like the Tourette's person, that you can control the voluntariness of it, but it's very short-lived. And that urge, that craving will trump, it will overpower, because it's in a part of the brain that overpowers voluntary choice. And when people say you should just stop, it's with moralistic statement, because they can stop, but they don't have that urge and that need to basically that urge that's as powerful as the person who's suffering. So really, I mean, what you're trying to suggest to that person is, you have to have compassion. People don't like to use the word disease. You have a disorder. You have something going on in the brain that has been miswired, and that's not your fault. It's, if anybody's fault, it's the food industry, which has tapped into that and has extenuated that, exaggerated that.
So a colleague of mine recently, a medical colleague, even said, there's no food addiction. You have to eat.
Yeah.
You can't be addicted to food. And I'm like, no, you don't have to eat garbage.
No, you don't have to eat garbage. Exactly. That's like saying you have to breathe if you're trying to get the person to quit smoking. Well, you have to breathe.
Yeah, you don't have to put cancer sticks in your mouth as you breathe. And yet that just kind of defies logic. And a lot of doctors come at this, just put down the food, step back from the table, and they don't get it. So we're in a medical world that doesn't understand. In fact, the obesity medicine world, funny you should say, most obesity medicine doctors don't understand this. I went to my most recent medicine, it's called the OMA, Obesity Medicine Association. One of my colleagues came up to me, I've known him for years. He said, Eric, Dr. Westman, Eric, that's the first time you ever said addiction, food addiction. And I didn't realize, so much time had passed.
Yes.
I feel like I've talked about this forever now, but yeah, there was probably a time when I didn't really understand the degree to which food is so similar. I mean, but you've dealt with other addictions. You might explain your background.
Yes.
How is food addiction similar or different than these
Yeah.
other, what people perceive as hardcore addictions?
Yeah, so I mean that is a really it's a real eye-opening experience for me working in the field of addiction. So I'm just going to give you a great example. I work in a treatment center, a resident, so I get to see people come in for a month, and they're living there, and they will come in and they're coming off of drugs like crystal meth or alcohol, like serious alcohol, like seizures if they stop. Or cocaine, and actually we're seeing more and more people with cannabis as well, believe it or not, but because it's becoming so prevalent now. But some of these drugs are pretty serious drugs. I think about crystal meth as being probably one of the most potent drugs that will bring a person down so that they lose their functionality within 2 or 3 years, and fentanyl addiction as well, which is opiate addiction. But fentanyl fentanyl and crystal meth are like the most potent of their category of drugs. They're most potent. So people, the guys are coming in, or the women are coming in, they're detoxing off of that drug, and then what inevitably happens is they say, I can't understand why I am eating so much. Now, if you're coming off of a stimulant, yes, definitely you want to eat a lot because you haven't been eating and there's that urge to eat for the first 2 or 3 days. But we're talking 3rd week, 4th week, and they're eating not good food that, well, I'm not going to say that the treatment centers give necessarily good food, but they're not giving candy bars and whatnot. But they do have a machine, a vending machine in their center that people are constantly going and getting soda pop and chips and whatnot. And they say, I don't know why I'm eating all this. And then often what I've seen is over the months, when I sometimes see them in follow-up, their belly is getting bigger and bigger. They're gaining weight. Initially, they were happy because they thought, wow, I'm gaining weight. That's good. But then they realize it's all packing around their center, which of course we know is visceral obesity and not good. And they're starting to realize, well, I better stop eating this way. And they can't. And the telling thing for me is over and over and over again, I hear people saying, this is harder to quit than the alcohol. And when I heard people saying, this is harder to quit than crystal meth, I mean, that just floored me the first time I heard that.
It's harder to quit sugar and
yes.
food than crystal meth.
Yes,
Wow.
harder to quit sugar than crystal meth. And you think, why would that be? So crystal meth, the drug of crystal meth is so powerful that you may be, the guy is begging on the street, can you give me some money? And you know that they haven't eaten. So you might decide, okay, let's hope they're not going to use it for drugs. They're going to use it for food. They need that, but they will still go and use it for the drug, despite the fact that they need that little extra 10 or 20 bucks, whatever you gave them. So when you've got something that potent, and then the person says sugar was harder, why do we not see that?
Well, so some things that strike me is that it's legal and it's easy to get.
Exactly.
How can it be bad?
Exactly. And we call it food. When it's not food, it's a food product. It's not a food. Otherwise, the person wouldn't be addicted to it with the potency, with the crystal meth potency. But the only way we can get a whiff of it, that it is that potent, besides when a person is actually trying to stop, is if you say to the person, you know what, just for tonight, I don't want you to have your special treat that you have before you go to sleep, or after your meal. You're just going to have you probably came up with this, Eric. Don't you have this when you're presenting your 20-gram keto plan? When you present there you are, they're coming to you and you're saying, I've got a solution. Here's a diet plan and I want you to follow it. Isn't the first reaction, you're kidding? You want me to stop eating all these carbs?
Oh, people cry.
Exactly.
When faced with that.
Yes, that's it. And the level of crying is probably the level of addiction. So that's where you get a whiff of the problem, is when you ask the person to stop, even for that meal or that day.
Well, of course, I pitch it, I frame it in here are all the great things that will happen. And of course you can have ribeye steak and all these other things, which I guess is kind of like giving a methadone or Suboxone or some to me, sugar-free Jello is like a crutch to get you off sugar.
Yes.
But the total cessation of the drug is like what I teach. The keto diet is a total, pretty much cessation of all of the sugar and starch, the addictive element. And so
Yes.
that's kind of similar to other treatments for addiction.
Yes, yes. And you have to go through a withdrawal. And so once we start talking the language of addiction, we start to recognize what we see clinically. The person, like you said, cries, or they have some reaction. And then, you give them some hope, but they're going to come back. And I don't know, I'm sure you've had the experience where people are relapsing. They come back and go, I tried and I lost weight, but I'm eating it again. I don't know how to stop.
I had cravings.
Yes. Yes.
So the hallmark of withdrawal syndrome, right, is that you do have cravings for the substance that you stopped.
Absolutely. And when people say, I hear this all the time too, I can't, doctors don't want to ask somebody to stop because they'll say, they'll just feel deprived and then they'll binge and use more, which is true. That will happen. So what you have to do is help the person through that period of time, because what they're going through is withdrawal. The deprivation that the person feels that night or the next few days is part of the withdrawal. It's an enhanced need to feel normal again, because you're not taking your drug. And when the alcoholic doesn't take their drug, they get shaky and sweaty and agitated. When the person who's quitting smoking doesn't get their drug, all they can think about is that cigarette, and they're getting antsy. Like they're feeling deprived, yes, but because we normalize food, we say we shouldn't do that to people. What we got to do instead is say, this is post-acute withdrawal. It lasts about, I don't know, 3 days if you're lucky, 4 days, up to sometimes up to 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the person, how long they've been doing it, how much it depends on the person. I would say anywhere, if you're lucky, like you said, 3 to 4 days to 3 weeks, it's over. It's over then. It's not like this is going to be life. You got to get through this actual withdrawal process.
So just to kind of reiterate, if you have any interest in learning more, go to adaptyourlifeacademy.com, click on the sugar and food addiction course, get on the waiting list, learn more about the course. You'll get the information and heads up about the sugar-free challenge, which I think is a nominal $9 or something. So I hope, thousands and thousands of people will sign up for the sugar-free challenge. If that wasn't enough, then you can consider taking the larger course that actually gets the personalized support as you do what, really rephrasing it now, is kind of a cold turkey keto diet off sugar for 3 weeks, and we'll help you the best we can. We put all of our resources into the students in our classes. So the first, kind of go to Adapt Your Life Academy, get more information about the sugar and food addiction course, consider doing the sugar challenge, and then consider doing the larger course if you need it. And a percentage of folks, all you really need to know is that this is an issue and you'll be able to solve it. And then just as a last note, please don't blame yourself. If you're in this addictive hurricane, there's help, and we want to help you get over this if you need our help. Dr. Tarman, thank you so much. And you're talking to me from
Toronto, Canada.
Toronto, Canada. And I really hope we can help spread this information to inform people, and so they can make positive changes in their health. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Always happy to talk about this.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.